Thank you so much for joining us. And I can also see that all bets are off. That's an inside joke. We were betting how many people were going to join us. We're well over 200 right now, on our way to a 300. So thank you so much. Please know this Zoom presentation is being recorded. In about a month, maybe sooner, it will be edited and available on our website. So for your friends and family who are unable to join us this evening, it will be available on our website. The following sentence you'll probably hear several times also, and that this is a presentation that will be focusing on work of George Quinn, who is a graduating senior, and he was awarded a Board of Trustee fellowship. Details to follow, but why I mention this is I'm the one that often answers the phone, and so many of you call to ask, is my business being highlighted tonight? So these are businesses that George has studied about, and Dr. Hayse will continue explaining about our project. And as I say, without further ado, I wanted to introduce to you Associate Professor of Historical Studies, Dr. Michael Hayse, and he also holds the Wally and Lutz Hammerschlag Associate Professor of Holocaust Studies. Dr. Hayse, thank you so much.
Thank you, Gail, and thanks to everybody for joining us tonight. I'm really excited because this is a real milestone for a project that we have been working on, the South Jersey Holocaust Survivor project, the goal of which is to create a digital archive and a digital exhibition. But in the meantime, we will be having a number of different sort of spin-offs of that. Tonight, we're going to hear from George, and he'll show you the core of what will become a much larger exhibit on the Holocaust survivor-owned businesses in southern New Jersey. And he'll have a lot more to say about that. I would like to say thank you to all of those in the audience who shared your family stories with us, whether it is about the businesses or the Holocaust experiences or the experience of your family members in South Jersey as Holocaust survivors. It's really important to us. So far, we have almost 1,470 survivors in our database, and we're working as quickly as we can. So if we haven't gotten to your profile yet, or if you have your loved ones have one of the Holocaust survivor-owned businesses, and it's not one of the one that is highlighted tonight, rest assured that we're working on it. George is only one person. We have a team. And so if we haven't heard from you yet, and you know of a business owned by a Holocaust survivor, and you'd like to share that information, if we haven't yet got it in our database, we would love to talk to you, hear from you. So please contact us. I have two things that we'll be putting in the chat where you should go. That is the chat function, the little icon that says chat under it at the bottom of your screen. One is, and it's my great pleasure to announce, a link for the website to the Holocaust survivor-owned businesses of Southern New Jersey. This is now live. We've been working on this for some time, and you will notice that there are 26 businesses that are currently linked to profiles. So you can look at the profiles, you can download the profiles, you can browse them at your leisure, either while we're talking or even better, after this presentation. The other thing that I'd like to put in that actually Irvin will put for us in the chat is a telephone number and an email address. The number is for the Holocaust Resource Center if you'd like to contact us about a Holocaust survivor in your family, so that we can make sure that we get all the information and documents from you that you may wish to share. And the other is my Stockton email address. Feel free to reach out to me with the same thing. You can call, you can write. I would like to now introduce our featured speaker tonight, a person that I know well at this point, and that is George Quinn, who is a Stockton undergraduate. As Gail mentioned, his major is in political science. He has a minor in Holocaust and Genocide Studies. He grew up in this area, and so he's been a big help to me since I'm a transplant into this region, because he knows this region very, very well. So He's been able to bring that knowledge to bear for the larger project, and he's been working on the Holocaust Survivor project here at Stockton now for over 3 semesters. And this is the culmination. For this semester, he had the great honor to apply for and receive a Stockton Board of Trustees scholarship, of which few are given out. So it's a prestigious sort of feather in his cap, to turn the Holocaust survivor-owned business profiles that he was creating into a presentation and exhibit. So we now have the website. So he has, after he's done tonight, finished that job. And he's going to be moving on. He's graduating in May. And I'm also proud to announce that George is going on to a PhD program in political science at Rutgers University this fall. So without further ado, George, if you'd like to take over.
Thank you so much, Professor Hayse. I appreciate that really kind introduction. Let me get my share together and let me begin the presentation. Hold on one second. Okay, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for coming on tonight. I'm really happy to see everyone here. I want to begin by highlighting a lot of these interesting businesses, and I hope we enjoy our time together. First, I want to begin by talking about the background history of these Holocaust survivors and sort of the story of their coming to the South Jersey region. For our project, many of the families we cover experienced displacement during the Holocaust. Holocaust survivors were deported to Nazi ghettos, often placed in concentration camps and death camps. Millions of Jewish refugees following the Holocaust were placed in displaced person camps. This is all occurring within the 1939 to 1945 time range. Following the placement in displaced person camps, for many, not all, but for many, common destinations from displaced person camps included Israel and the United States. The majority of Holocaust survivors that came to the United States landed in New York City. And a large percentage of the arrivals who are survivors to the South Jersey region were originally here in New York City. Moving into sort of the question of why South Jersey. As Irvin and I talked about earlier today, one thing that so many of the survivors that we talk with and have heard from tell us and ask us a simple question: what language do chickens speak? That question really is an insight into life on the farm and the fact that English wasn't needed. It wasn't a prerequisite for running a farm and to enjoy life on the farm for themselves and their families. For the majority of Holocaust survivors in this region of the country, it was chicken farms, poultry farms. Hundreds of survivors came to Atlantic, Cape May, and Cumberland counties. Often farmers clustered together. Families often farmed along with brothers and sisters. The farmers stuck together and worked to make egg production profitable. The clusters of farms located, you'll see it on our map in a second, are located around a few small communities. One would be Laureldale in Mays Landing. Another is McKee City in Mays Landing and EHC. One is Oceanville, which is only about 5 miles away from Stockton's main campus here in Galloway. Another is Woodbine, but a very large one is also Vineland. But that's just a few of many clusters of communities that exist that were poultry farm communities. So I want to show sort of life on the poultry farms and the economic decline that kind of came during this time. First off, life was very difficult on the farm. There was a lot of work. There was a lot of work for children, a lot of work for parents. Life was difficult, but the big thing that many of the people we talked with, the kids and the survivors themselves, the thing that they enjoyed the most was that they were independent. They finally had an opportunity to make a living for themselves, for their family, and for their children. So 2 factors contributed to the decline of chicken farms in the late 50s and early 1960s. This is following post-war settlement in the United States and particularly South Jersey. The introduction of factory farming and farms of massive scale that undercut egg prices and caused egg prices to decline. Another is the sunsetting of World War II era egg price controls. Those 2 things did hamstring the poultry farm industry. Holocaust survivors once again had to reinvent themselves after experiencing what they experienced in Europe, coming to the United States, and now being part of an industry that was in decline. Some families, not all, but some families, decided to diversify and invested in business ventures that they independently owned and operated in Atlantic, Cape May, and Cumberland counties. So I want to show us sort of how we ended up creating the database in which we built the profiles off of. The South Jersey Holocaust Survivor Archive and Exhibition Team created and maintained a data and contained and maintains a database of 134 businesses in the Tri-County area that fit the following criteria. The business was or is located in Atlantic, Cape May, and Cumberland County, and the business was or is owned and operated by Holocaust survivors. How did we document these businesses? This is very important to us. We conducted detailed archival research in newspapers, in interviews with survivors, and with oral testimonies that many parents and people who are no longer with us gave to the USC Shoah Foundation and to Stockton itself. Second, when possible, we contacted Holocaust survivors and their relatives recently. We were able to really accelerate this during COVID because many of us were able to go on Zoom and interview many survivor families and their children. And finally, we have the information that we've gathered and we put it into a business profile. And that's what you'll see tonight, a profile that highlights the biographies of these personal stories, the successes and stories of the businesses, and how we pieced it together in a really nice package for everyone to understand. So I want to show everyone now a map, and this is not complete by any measure, but this is a map of the extent that we have been able to determine and locating poultry farms in Atlantic, Cape May, and Cumberland counties. As you can tell, there's 373 farms on this map. We have it's our expectation that we're going to find many more farms than the ones that are clustered here, but this shows you a geographic distribution. And one also thing you can note, if you are someone who's familiar to the region, is you can very easily see the clusters of people in farming communities. One would be Woodbine here. Another would be Laureldale here in Mays Landing, but a very large cluster here is in Vineland. One is here in McKee City, another in Oceanville. So there are several clusters. So I want to also now show a map of 118. Now the database is 134, so there's some we haven't been able to locate, but 118 currently archived businesses. And I want to show you specifically where they're located. And one thing that you can find as a pattern is that a lot of these businesses were located in the immediate communities of where the poultry farms were. And I will show you now both of them at the same time. You can see most of these maps overlap. So the superimposed map shows us the number of poultry farms and the number of businesses. The one exception is lower Cape May area between Wildwood and Cape May. Those businesses were founded not near poultry farms, but with the exception of that, most businesses clustered around the farms themselves. So I want to go over and show the primary source materials that we developed strategically looking through and corroborating research that we were confirming with people. First, we deeply looked into the USC Shoah Foundation's oral testimonies and the Stockton Oral History Project. In addition, we got information from interviews with survivor children. We were able to conduct and receive chicken farm research from the Jewish Agricultural Society and the Jewish Poultry Farm Association archives, which are located at Rutgers University. We were able to do many Ancestry.com research on the survivors and their parental and parental ancestry research. And then we also conducted newspaper researchers, and particularly we were able to get access to the Vineland Daily Journal. And if you can see on the slide here, this headline of the poultry section of the Vineland Times Journal, that's something that's very emblematic of the amount of coverage poultry farming and the survivor community had in the Vineland Times Journal / Daily Journal. And then two really important sources are books. One written by Leo Schoffer, whose father was a survivor himself in Mays Landing. The title is A Dream, a Journey, a Community, a nostalgic look at Jewish businesses in and around Atlantic City. And another book is A Cape May Story, which was written by Diane Stopia, which covers the Stat and Hirsch families. So now I would like to go ahead and give you a overview of the profiles. And I want to just make clear the profiles themselves contain short biographies and the information of their businesses and community information as well. So just so you know, the profiles are not all encompassing. The main focus is businesses, but we wanted to also give everyone an understanding of personal biographies of these survivors. So an overview. Tonight's initial launch represents 26 out of 134 profiles. Last time we calculated, that's just 19% of the businesses we've identified for the database. For this launch, we have included a diverse group of businesses of multiple sizes and sectors. We made sure to verify all information presented tonight. If our team managed to get anything incorrect, please make us aware after this event. Please make us aware after this event. We really appreciate your feedback to our team. We are all historians, and you all know your families very well, and we want to get as much information, as much accurate information as possible. So I'm going to enter an overview of the profiles. Just to be clear, my presentation is an overview. You have the opportunity to read all of the profiles in the Zoom link that will follow, and there will be some sample profiles that we'll go into depth with. But make sure you see the chat in this and the link there. That is where you will be able to access all 26 of them. So let me start with Atlantic County. We currently have documented 46 businesses in Atlantic County. Tonight, we are unveiling 8 profiles. 2 were in retail sectors. You can see those right there. 2 were in lodging and food and beverage, and 4 were in property and land development. This is the list of the profiles that we will be covering in the current 26. I will show you some photos. This photo left here represents Schoffer Enterprises. That's Sam Schoffer's egg farm located in Mays Landing. This is Brigantine Pharmacy, owned and operated by Don and Nan Berkman. And this is the Four Seasons Hotel, which was operated by Max and Ed Gerwitz and George Greenman. This represents the remaining Atlantic County profiles. On the left is the Mainland Professional Plaza, which was built and owned and operated by Trustee and Keeshan Development, Jack Trustee and Pinkish Keeshan. On the right side is David Berkowitz manning the grill at Dave's Fantastic Foods located on the boardwalk. And below in the right corner here is a photo of Rose Zaywood making, I believe those are macaroons for Passover in the 80s for her kosher catering business. So now we've seen the Atlantic County profiles. I want to take a look now at the Cape May County businesses. In Cape May County, we only hosted, so we have documented 11 businesses. I'm sure there are more that we will come across as we do our research. But we are unveiling 3 profiles tonight. One is the Atlas Inn, owned and operated by Harry and Ruth Satt. They also owned and operated Seashore Food Distributors and Montreal Inn, which was owned and operated by Harry and Sophie Hirsch. These photos represent their particular businesses. On the left here is Seashore Food Distributors. On the right here is a postcard of the Atlas Motor Inn and the beach in Cape May. And on top here are a collection of 5 pictures from the Montreal Beach Resort. So I hope that you all enjoy those photos. Let me move to Cumberland County. So Cumberland County, we have documented 73, actually 74, my apologies, we updated 1 today, 74 businesses. We are unveiling only 15 of the 74 businesses we've identified in Cumberland County that were owned and operated by Holocaust survivors. The sectors include retail, which was 5 of them. You can see the list right there. 4 were lodging, food and beverage, and 6 were industrial, wholesale, or professional services. And the families and survivors' last names are located to the right for each of these businesses. I'll give you a chance to read for a second. Okay, now I'll turn to some photos. In Cumberland County, we see on the left here, Delsey Yard Goods, a Vineland Daily Journal ad for Delsey Yard Goods. That's owned and operated by Eva and Mars Gorney. And right here is Herbert Bernstein in front of the Bernstein Typewriters business. To the right here is Al and Mary Singer, who owned and operated the Circle Plaza Motel in Vineland. On the left here is an ad for Delsey Catering, owned by the Leopold family. In the middle here is a Vineland Daily Journal ad for Esther's Dress Shop, owned by Esther Freidenberg. On the right here is a storefront or frontage of the warehouse for Bierig Brothers Meats and Bierig Brothers Incorporated. These photos here, you can see on the left here is the Buena Vista Motel, which was located on Route 40 in Buena Vista Township. This is technically in Atlantic County, if you are smart and pithy to it, but the owners of the Buena Vista Motel had most of their businesses established in Cumberland County. So that's why it's filed under Cumberland County. This is a ad for Miles Lerman Oil Company. This is a photo for Highway 77 Motel, owned and operated by the Broncash family. On the left here is a photo of a van for Lisa Electrical Supply. Right here is the frontage of Tri-City Lumber. Above it is an ad for P&L Feed Mill. And on the right here is Sam and Clara Wasserstrom inside their marketplace. So I hope you all enjoyed those photos and an overview of everything you'll be able to read in the chat further. So tonight, my thought and our presentation is going to show 4 specific businesses as profiles and slides that will give us brief information on them. Those 4 are listed below there. They're going to be simply there for you to take a look at as we go through together to get a better read of how to read these profiles. Once again, we would love to talk about every single business here, all 26 of them. I would love to spend all night with you talking about them each and individually. Love to have slides of them. But because of time constraints, we cannot do that. But these 4 represent a representative sample of these businesses, and stories you'll identify are very similar to possibly your own or families that you know. So I will go into the sample profiles. So I want to start out highlighting Dave's Fantastic, which is a hot dog place and boardwalk shop located in Atlantic City. Dave and Esther Berkowitz were born in Poland. Both were Holocaust survivors who fled Poland seeking refuge and lived in exile in the Soviet Union. There's an incredible amount of information we have about the Berkowitzes that we couldn't put in all the slides. Their story is quite remarkable. They returned home to find most of their families had perished in the Holocaust, and their Jewish communities that they lived in and were born in did not exist anymore. After 5 years in a displaced person camp in Germany, they were granted visas to immigrate to the United States, first settling in Brooklyn. Dave's Fantastic after living in New York City for a few months, David and Esther settled on a poultry farm in Egg Harbor City, New Jersey. Dave Berkowitz founded Dave's Fantastic in the mid-1960s while operating their poultry farm. The food stand boomed after a widely published promotion of Dave's mile-long hot dogs, and the business benefited from its prime location on the Atlantic City Boardwalk, adjacent to the Steel Pier, many other boardwalk attractions. It was located at Virginia Avenue and the boardwalk. In addition to being incredibly hardworking, Dave had a reputation for being generous and charitable. He regularly donated leftover food in the summer to the homeless and those less fortunate in Atlantic City. Dave passed away in 1973. Today, the site of Dave's Fantastic is occupied by the Hard Rock Casino and Hotel. Other boardwalk Holocaust survivor-owned businesses include Placate Arcade, which was owned and operated by the Tracht family and located on California Avenue in the boardwalk. So I will let you take in those photos as well. That photo right in the center is on the bottom here is the frontage of the building in Atlantic City. This is Dave at the Friar and Dave and his wife, Esther. So I'm going to move on to the next sample profile. So Tower Hospitality is the next sample profile that we'll be documenting. So going through their specific stories, Sam Roth and Elizabeth Ehrlich Roth were originally from Transcarpathia, Czechoslovakia. At the time, as they grew up, the Hungarians were the people who were in charge of that region of Europe. The Hungarians did not turn over Jews for deportation from 1940 to 1944. In 1944, the Germans occupied the region. The Roth and Ehrlich's families were deported to Auschwitz in mid-1944. Sam was sent to Gießen II concentration camp, where he was forced to perform manual labor. Sam spent the final days of the war in Gunskirchen, which was liberated by the U.S. Army in May 1945. Elizabeth and her sister Rella were the only members of their immediate family to survive the selection at Auschwitz. The two sisters were later sent to Stutthof concentration camp and then to an underground ammunition factory. A few months after they were forced on a death march, as the Soviet Red Army approached, they were liberated by the Soviet Red Army in 1945. Sam and Elizabeth met in Bebelova and were married. And the Roths then immigrated to the United States in 1949 and settled in Philadelphia. In 1952, the couple bought a poultry farm with another Holocaust survivor couple and then purchased their own farms in 1955. Seeing the decline in poultry farming, Sam Roth began delivering eggs to restaurants and wholesale customers. After 20 years on the chicken farm, the Roths purchased their first motel, the Buena Vista Motel, which is a photo of right here, located on Harding Highway in Buena Township in the mid-1970s. The Roth family purchased and sold properties in Cumberland, Cape May, and Atlantic counties, founding Tower Hospitality as an umbrella management company. In 1986, the Roths purchased Circle Plaza Motel on Landis Avenue and Delsea Drive in downtown Vineland from another Holocaust survivor, Alla Mary Singer. And I'll just let you guys know a story that we were able to get from Barbara, a Singer Roth, who was able to talk to us. Barbara's parents, Mary and Al Singer, were survivors, and another couple were survivors. And the couple we're talking about, Sam and Elizabeth Roth. And the Singers were looking to sell their hotel to the Roth family. And Barbara and Henry were with their parents, joining them at the closing of the deal of their sale of the hotel. And Barbara and Henry met each other there and eventually married. And this was, we talked about this was like the ultimate business merger as families go through. But we wanted to share that story, and they've been married for over 30 years. So we really appreciate them telling us that story. But that's just an example of many of the families coming together and loving each other in these in the wake of the poultry farms. In the mid-1990s, the owners of Tower Hospitality, Sam and Elizabeth Roth, franchised their Cumberland County properties to host major hotel brands such as Wingate by Wyndham, Hampton Inn and Holiday Inn Express. Tower Hospitality also started 3 Denny's franchises in Northfield, Millville, and Vineland. Many of you probably know those locations if you're from Atlantic and Cumberland counties, as well as a Bennigan's on Landis Avenue in Vineland. Today, Tower Hospitality maintains 3 hotel franchises and sold their 3 Denny's franchises in December 2019. So that's Tower Hospitality, again, an overview. Now I'm going to turn to Brigantine Pharmacy, which is another Holocaust survivor-owned business, one that was featured on our flyer that we sent around to everyone. Brigantine Pharmacy, so I'll begin. Don Chipkin Berkman was born in 1941 in Drusk, Poland, near Vilna. As an infant, his family was forced into a small ghetto near Vilna. Don's father and family were murdered by the Instandgruppen, which was the mobile killing units in Europe at the time. Both Don and his mother, Sara, hid in a closet while Nazis cleared the ghetto. They then left the ghetto, hiding in a convent, and then were in the woods hiding for 2.5 years until the area was liberated by the Soviet Red Army. Sara married Michael Chipkin in Vilna. Michael's family and the Chipkins were also murdered in the Holocaust. The family fled Vilna and lived in a DP camp in West Berlin. Sara and Michael Chipkin and their son Donald immigrated to the United States in 1949, and they settled on a poultry farm in Oceanville, New Jersey. Donald completed pharmacy school in 1962, where he interned at Brigantine Pharmacy and worked for the original store owner for several years. In 1966, Don and his wife Nan purchased Brigantine Pharmacy. The Berkmans also bought Harris Pharmacy next door. In 1980, the couple sold both pharmacy buildings and established Surf Sundries, which is located a picture on the left here. And this picture is also Don at the store of Surf Sundries. In 1980, the couple sold both pharmacy buildings, establishing Surf Sundries. a gift shop for locals and visitors to Brigantine. The shop is currently open and managed by Donald's son, Alan Chipkin. So I want to turn now to the last sample profile that we'll go over, and this is VineCo, the Vineland Egg Cooperative, which was founded in 1951. VineCo established by multiple poultry farmers in Cumberland County as a way to compete with newly established large-scale egg producers. We talked earlier about the factors driving down prices of eggs. This was a remedial effort from the farmers to try to offset the drop in those prices. By creating cooperative owned wholesale and marketing company, VineCo replaced the commercial middleman. VineCo was responsible for the heavily marketed Vineland Eggs campaign, well known in the South Jersey area. VineCo was collectively owned and distributed, VineCo was collectively owned and distributed member-produced eggs. Many poultry farmers in the region joined the cooperative. Alongside Italian-American, Hispanic-American, and other non-Jewish farmers, Holocaust survivors in Vineland played a major role in the egg cooperative, including managerial roles as elected members of the VineCo board of directors. And, we wanted to highlight how much of a melting pot Vineland was at the time and how many poultry farmers come from many different places. One of the Vineland Daily Journal ads that was printed in 12/11/1956 shows 3 survivors sitting on the board of the VineCo Egg Cooperative. One would be Hal Leeser. Another one is Sally Mayerfield, who is vice president, and John Reinman, who was a board member. Others included Arthur Kane, who was a treasurer, Bernard Dowman, who was a manager, and Willie Siegel, who was the chair of the business committee. In 1956, VineCo opened a large egg processing plant, pictured on the left here, right here, located at Sherman Avenue and Orchard Road in Vineland, advertising in the Vineland Daily Journal, and VineCo offered this testimonial. You can read it for yourselves. And overall, VineCo served as a successful way for poultry farmers to turn a profit under tough economic circumstances. And so I'll leave you with this really beautiful collage of the VineCo Egg Cooperative, which survivors made up a incredibly important and impactful role. There's some chicken houses, there's some chicken coops there, the distribution facility, and Vineland Eggs billboard, which some older folks I'm sure in the audience know very well. So I want to say that this concludes the presentation. I'd like to say some really important thank yous. I want to thank the faculty, staff, and students at the Holocaust Resource Center. That includes Dr. Michael Hayse, Gail Rosenthal, who you all heard from earlier today, Irvin Moreno Rodriguez, and Morgan Everman, and others. Matt Assad is another one. There's so many other people who volunteer and come in and out of the center who've been so helpful. And I want to say a particular thank you to MAHG Section 5028, Genocide Special Topics, and others who contributed to the biographical information for these profiles. They include Priscilla Bartley, Brianna Doherty, Martina Giuliani, Jennifer Sartine, Josh Cutler, Raneem Garib, Ingrid Rivero Batista, Irvin Moreno Rodriguez, and Allison Chrysalis. All of you put in so much work and effort into these profiles. When you read these profiles, you'll see their efforts and you'll see them cited below. So lastly, just use the link to enter these profiles. We'll be going to Q&A in a second. I think Irvin's going to take over, but follow these key steps to navigate it. And I really hope you enjoyed my presentation of just a very small amount of the important stories that happen on these poultry farms and small businesses in Atlantic, Cape May, and Cumberland counties. Thank you all.
Dr. Hayse, we will turn it back to you.
Thank you so much,
This was totally not in the program, but if you could all just unmute yourself and clap for George. George, you were amazing, beyond any of our expectations. The work you did is amazing. Bravo. I put that in the chat to you.
Yes.
Thank you.
And
Thank
additionally,
you,
I would
Dr.
like to
Hayse.
add to that, as an academic, we had asked George to sort of keep it brief so we leave time for questions and answers. And my general experience is that you give a person a microphone and they always run over their time. George has come in under time. So that shows a great deal of discipline on top of everything else that he's accomplished. So thanks, George.
Thank you so much, Professor. I appreciate that.
No, it's really good. And really, I have to stress once again that what George was able to present on the in his PowerPoint, in his presentation, is only a small fraction of the work that's been done by George and many others that I'm glad that he thanked. Again, this is one selection really of the much larger business profiles. The business profiles are part of the much larger project that we're working on. And so I would like to once again point people to the website. The link is in the chat. You want to bookmark that at your leisure, because you can look at those profiles, you could download them and read them at your leisure. As George mentioned, we don't have time to cover them all. That said, we have a lot of good questions that have been coming in, and one, George, wherever you feel comfortable, go ahead, but if you'd like to hand off to me or to Gail or Irvin or anybody else, then please just say so. But the first question is from Victor Borden. He'd like to know why we're looking at Cumberland, Cape May, and Atlantic counties, and why we're not, as a South Jersey project, looking at Gloucester, Camden, and Burlington counties. And I'll add in there Salem County as well. George, would you like to handle that one, or would you like me to?
Well, why don't you start and I'll finish.
Okay. All right. The simple answer is we can't do everything. All right. Already we have our hands full just trying to cover what I think is going to turn out to be 1,600 to 1,700 survivors that we identify who lived in the 3 counties that we are looking at. The second thing I'll say is that because we're looking at Cumberland County, which borders on most of those counties, those additional counties, we are indeed including people in the project who lived in, for instance, Salem County and Norma, in Buena Vista, which I guess is Atlantic County anyway, and some of the other neighboring counties that were essentially sort of in the Vineland orbit, right? So that we're not being completely strict about this. But frankly, especially if we add Camden County, we're moving a little bit too far north and toward Philadelphia, and the number of survivors would just sort of mushroom at that point. I think it would overwhelm our ability to cover it. Plus, there are institutions in that region, both in Philadelphia, Cherry Hill, Camden, that really have a sort of an interest in that region. And so while we all work cooperatively, you know, these 3 counties are really in this sort of Stockton catchment area, if I could put it that way. Okay,
I would also, that's a great explanation. I'd also just add that many of the JPFA loans and Jewish Agricultural Society plants for chicken farms for refugees were mostly consolidated to Cumberland, Atlantic, and Cape May counties. Even though many other farms existed in outside of those counties, the center, particularly the center for poultry farming, was mostly, at least for Cumberland County, was Vineland. So that kind of limits our area.
Right. And if you move up north a little bit, there are other places that if we really you know, had unlimited time and resources, you know, there's Farmingdale that also had a lot of these Holocaust survivor owned poultry farms. There's some up in even New York State and other states. So we're not the only region that had them, but this is a particularly sort of considerable concentration of them in these areas. And those of you who are on the Zoom who grew up in these areas, particularly in Vineland and around McKee City, you know, Egg Harbor Township, Laureldale, that region, you know what I'm talking about. All right, that there, you know, there were communities. It was more than just chicken farms, right? And part of our larger project then is to look at the many other things besides the businesses, including synagogues that were built by Holocaust survivors, other institutions. I have a student who's another undergraduate student who's doing a great job looking at, for instance, the Hebrew Women's Benevolent Society. All right, so it's a great question. We have to sort of put limits someplace, and so that's our story, and we're sticking to it. Okay. Martin Sharevsky asks, do we know if lifting the World War II egg regulations, and I think he means price controls, lead to a price increase that drew in large-scale commercial egg producers?
Well, I don't know if the two are correlated, but it did. What is fascinating is that they both did happen at the same time. So it is very common that the farms couldn't keep up with the lower prices. At the same time, large scale farms operated. One solution that we highlighted at the end of the presentation was the Vineco Egg Cooperative, which allowed wholesale farmers to sell prices that were considerably lower. That kind of created, like I said earlier, the Vineland Eggs ad, and that sort of model of Vineland Eggs. So I don't know necessarily the answer to the question of whether they're connected, but I will say that they did happen at the same time.
And I'll add on to that as well, right? Yes, there was a real price squeeze, especially beginning in the mid 1950s on through the late 1960s, so that by the early 1960s, most of the smart money said you had to get out of egg farming just because it wasn't as profitable as it used to be. The profit margin was sort of shrinking. There was a squeeze. Feed prices were going up. The price that was being paid for eggs was going down. There are a lot of different factors for that. And while it might seem sort of inside baseball to talk about egg prices, you just have to leaf through the pages of the Vineland Times Journal in the mid 1950s that had a whole egg farming section in it, the poultry farm section, where these things were discussed in great detail because they were really economic life and death issues. Many things contributed. There was refrigerated trucking that allowed eggs to be brought up from lower wage areas in the South, particularly, like Georgia and the Gulf states, which undercut the prices here in the mid-Atlantic. There was scale. Those were larger farms, as was mentioned. And one response through the 1950s for many farmers here in our area was simply to increase the number of chickens on their farm, right? So you increase the number of layers, you have more volume, even if per egg you're making less, then maybe you can make up for it in volume. But there were limits to that, hence things like Vineco. There was another cooperative that was established in Norma at about the same time in the mid 1950s. They built their own feed processing mill. And this was also cooperatively owned by chicken farmers so that they could get a better price on bulk feed, right? So there were a lot of things like that were going on. It was just a changing economic world. And yes, the end of price controls at the end of World War II was a big factor. One of the things, without getting into too much detail, that I think is fascinating is the degree to which these poultry farmers, Jewish poultry farmers, non-Jewish poultry farmers in our area were really actively discussing what they wanted. They didn't want handouts, they didn't want price supports, but they were definitely sending people to Trenton. They were sending delegations down to Washington, D.C. To find solutions to this problem that they were being squeezed. But ultimately, the economic tide was turning against the farms, and ultimately, almost all of them closed down by 1970. Right. We have some other questions. What businesses were the primary customers of the chicken farms? Were the farms supported by seashore tourist businesses? George, you want to handle that, or?
Yeah, sure. So the customers of the farms ranged in a lot of different ways. Some I'm sure that and some of the community members would know that some just sold eggs right at the side of the road, right at their houses where the coops were. But by and large, those were, particularly the more lucrative egg farms, were strategic in giving their eggs to businesses, to small businesses, shore communities. There's several examples I can think of that come to mind, but I think actually the one we highlighted tonight, Tower Hospitality, is one where Sam Roth was able to use his connections in businesses to businesses distributing eggs, and then move into different sort of businesses and restaurants. Restaurants made it up, hotels made it up, shore communities made it up. A lot of people getting breakfast on vacation probably made it up too. So I think that, and I'm sure grocery stores and other wholesale outlets mostly purchased from Vineco eggs. I think particularly in those late years in the 50s and 60s. So yeah.
And I'm going to add just one other thing. So it's very similar. In addition to egg routes, which was one way that egg farmers could sort of cut out the middleman, you actually sell retail to various to restaurants or stores, in Philadelphia or in other towns, you're sort of cutting out the middleman. So that was one way. But we have the Sapp family, for example, that we heard from. They opened up a chicken and egg store in, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, was that in Ocean City?
That was in Wildwood.
In Wildwood. Thank you very
Yeah.
much, George. So that
They
was in
opened a
Wildwood.
restaurant
It
and they called
eventually
it the Hen
became
House
The
Restaurant.
Hen House Restaurant,
Yeah.
right? And so you can see that natural evolution to trying to find a solution to the sort of economic squeeze of chicken farms. They had a farm not far away in Woodbine. And then they got out of the farming business. The typical story that we hear here from George, right? And now I've got more of a comment than a question, and this one's from Mona Traki. I'm glad to see that Mona's on. And she says, not only, of course, did her parents become Holocaust survivor business owners, and we have a profile for them as well that's available, but she says that she worked as a waitress at Dave's Fantastic. And Harry Holzer, she writes, spent the summers of 1973-74 working at Dave and Esther's. So
that's incredible.
Yeah,
if only I could go back and see you guys in that time.
One of the things I love about this project, and I think everybody else who's working on it, George, certainly you'd agree, is just you get to know the families. It's really meaningful to see the kind of community that was built up here. It's, really, more and more you get a sense of sort of the vibe, if you will, of the Jewish community, but especially the Holocaust survivor community here in southern New Jersey. Let's see. Can you walk us through the website? George, would you like to? I think that you should take the honors on that if you'd like to share.
Oh, I'd love to. Yeah, I guess we didn't really expect to be this ahead of time, but I can certainly do that. Let me actually do a screen share here. And so I'm going to go ahead and look and find the link in the chat, which is here. And it should take a second. Actually, I'm just going to copy this and put it in Chrome. Oh, hold on, Irvin. Let me make sure I have the right link. There we go. This is the right link. My apologies about that. So so this is a really great collage that was put together of everyone. I wanted to make sure that we highlighted a really good sample of everyone, modern day people who are in different times. And so, so these are your profiles. There are, I believe we said 26 of them, and I believe I'm right about that. For some reason, I want to keep saying 27, but it is 26. So let me go ahead and I'll pull up one. So let me pull up. Actually, let me pull up Circle Plaza Motel because I just saw Henry and Barbara right on my Zoom here. So Circle Plaza Motel is a profile example here. So this is going to show you a picture of Al and Mary Singer. Some information about their life, and then their hotel. This predating the hotel, Al Singer ran a rotisserie shop right on Delsey Drive and Landis Avenue. This is a photo of him manning the rotisserie. There's some information about the business. We tried to make sure that we kept these succinct. Some businesses were very extensive, so we tried to make sure that we kept them compact. Here's some great photos and some narrative for you to understand the concept of the businesses. And then finally, the thing that I think what we were just talking about earlier, Dr. Hayse, which is so cool, is the community. How many people were in the same business sector that were Holocaust survivors as these survivors themselves. And this is an example where the Cashman family, the Roth family, as I mentioned before, the Broncash family, were among those who owned and operated hotels and motels in Cumberland County. And here's some old Vineland Daily Journal photos that are really nice to look at. Some thank yous from the people who helped with the construction, and then some credits under here. So that's just an example of one. The easiest way to navigate this is to just press the back button on the left here, and you land on the homepage. Once you're on the homepage, you can pick up anything you want. These are sort of operated with the names of the survivors under here and the businesses that they own there. take a look around. There's a mix of Cumberland, Atlantic, and Cape May counties. They're not labeled on each, so you might get like a Cracker Jack surprise of, oh, I thought that this was Atlantic County, but it was actually Cumberland. You are welcome to look at them. So yeah, this is the way the website works. So I appreciate that. Thank you, Dr. Hayse.
That's great. A couple more questions. Ethan Jardim, hi Ethan, he's in one of my courses this semester, but Ethan asks, and I think it's really perceptive, when we talked about Salem County, he asks if there were any connections between these poultry farming communities that gave rise to some of the businesses and the original Alliance colony, which, as he writes correctly, was one of the first successful Jewish agricultural communities in the area.
Oh boy, were they. There was a lot of commitment and community between Alliance and survivors in Vineland. A lot of people we've talked with who are familiar with the area have mentioned to us that they believe one of the draws for many people on poultry farms was the established original Alliance community. And that similarly had a same situation in Atlantic County with Atlantic City. And I'm sure if you were able to read Leo Schoffer's book, you could see that there have been Jewish businesses in Atlantic City since the early 1900s. So the Jewish communities that existed in both Atlantic City and Alliance really provided a home base for a lot of people who were survivors themselves to come and establish poultry farms. But yes, Alliance and Woodbine, which were the two original Baron de Hirsch founded Jewish agricultural communities, were pivotal in those late 40s, early 50s and 60s era poultry farms.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I'm thinking of one, some of the literally alliances that took place between the Holocaust survivors who came either in the 1930s as refugees from Nazi Germany or after the war as Holocaust survivors who survived the ghettos and the camps, and in some cases intermarried with the existing Jewish community that was were descendants of the Alliance colonies. I'm thinking here, we interviewed members of the Schoffer family that fit that profile, right? So we got another question from my colleague, Dr. Tina Zapil. What was the biggest challenge the team faced in putting these profiles together? Well, Mr. Profiler, that's you, George.
Sorry, thank you. Yes, so the biggest challenge is that we didn't have enough time. That's the biggest challenge. We had so much information. We had so much detailed information. We have so much information from family members, from community members, from Stockton's archives, from the Shoah archives, from archives of the Vineland Daily Journal. We had so many local history archives. We had so much information that that it was time. Other than that, I will say one of the other sort of bottlenecks became understanding the importance of communicating with the families. And we were able to do that in a successful manner, but it did take a while to get good communication. And we really appreciate all of you reaching out and approving what we could get you to approve over the last couple of weeks. So thank you.
And again, any further corrections, it's part of the process.
Yes.
Is essentially peer review for academics. You know, we look at each other's work, we make comments, we make corrections and suggestions. And we need that from you as well. If you're from the families, if you're from the communities, you probably know a lot more than we do based on the sources that we're using. And that gives me a nice segue into the next set of questions. I'm going to read two questions and then we can try to answer them together, George. Okay. Both of them from Stockton students. One, what's the next step after your presentation? Will there be an exhibition? And the other, from student Josh Reeder, what resources would be best to look at the chicken farms, especially locations besides the map? I think some resources were present, but I did not have time to look further.
Okay, so I will say the next steps are, I can give a little bit of that, but I will give that to you after I'm done. So the next steps are that we are going to have profiles on a rolling basis created. Our ultimate goal would be to have profiles for each of the businesses we have in the database. I don't know if that's soon, but that profiles will be created on a rolling basis. This initial launch is just a little taste of what we could launch. I'm sure we'll probably get close to the number that we have currently. And a permanent exhibition, I think that the best thing that we could do for the profiles was to publish them online and have a Zoom sort of ribbon cutting, if you will. I think that was the best option because people are in different places, and it also allowed us to sort of show this information without having to show it in person. I think that there will be, at some point, we plan on having a full actual day that is a launch, and the business profiles will be a part of that.
Mm-hmm. And on the bigger picture for the South Jersey Holocaust Survivor Project, in addition to continuing to develop more of the profiles, after all, we've only done, what did you say, 19%, George, right, of the profiles of the business we so far identified. Remember, George is graduating. He's going on to bigger and better things. He's going to start sending me checks soon. But that was a joke.
Yes.
So after George leaves, he will not probably be working on this project anymore, and he's been the driving force behind these business profiles. I would like to put out a call to any of our students, graduate students who've done a great job on this already, and undergraduates who'd like to contribute to the project and have not yet, just to contact me, because we can set up an independent study. You can earn credit to work on this project, and so you will find out what kind of resources we use. But one of the big next steps for me is that now that we're coming out of the pandemic, many of the archives that we really need to visit and have lots of material that we can evaluate and build into the larger project about Holocaust survivors who came here. Most of that is in New York or Washington, D.C. or Philadelphia. We can start visiting the archives now. And I'd like to take some delegations of students for sort of whole days, or maybe even a series of days, to really go and get those documents, to sit in the archive reading rooms and do the hard work that we do as historians. And you can be part of that. Right. Or if anybody who would like to volunteer for the project, believe me, there's a lot of work to be done. So we do have other parts of the presentation of our material that will be available. And while I'm not going to give any specific dates, although privately we've kind of penciled some things in, one of the next ones will be survivor profiles that will also have their own website. That will also be sort of short versions of the individual biographies and family biographies. Not just of the business families. We have been working on an exhibition that will be a traveling physical exhibition of the chicken farms. I hope that is out, let's say by the end of the summer, early fall, but I'm not making any specific promises because we have to have it before we can present it. And then ultimately expect next year that we're going to officially open the digital archive and exhibition. Which will be all digital, but you will have to come to Stockton or contact us to be able to use it. It's not going to be on the web for a lot of different reasons. So there's lots of stuff coming down the pike, right? And I'm really looking forward to that. And anybody who wants to help, we've got plenty of work for you to do. Okay, I should mention that Cheryl Bronkesh, I have to put this out there before we run out of time, says that her father delivered eggs door to door in Millville. So another way of cutting through that, cutting out that middleman, like the egg stands that were on the major roads coming from Philadelphia to the shore, that in the summer were an important source of income for many of the poultry farms that had a good location on those roads. I think.
Thank you, Dr. Hayse. I think
we're running out of time. We said we'd end at 8 o'clock. I think we'd like to stick to that. Irvin?
Thank you, Dr. Hayse. Hello, everyone. My name is Irvin Moreno Rodriguez, and I am the program assistant of the Sara and Sam Schoffer Holocaust Resource Center at Stockton University. I want to thank George Quinn and Dr. Michael Hayse for their amazing presentation tonight. And I would also like to thank everyone who joined us tonight. And for those of you who will be watching this recording on the Sara and Sam Schoffer Holocaust Resource Center's YouTube channel, the recording will be made available within the next 2 weeks. In the Zoom chat box, we have placed Dr. Michael Hayes' email and the contact phone number for our Holocaust Resource Center. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to Dr. Michael Hayes via email or call us at 609-652-4699. So thank you for coming and have a good evening. Thank you, everyone.